orangey green here. I think it's important to get some concepts in place before we move on. And I am on the whole project New Reality Google site front page, but it's part of my material. It's part of my books. I have posted it on Facebook as well. How we kind of work with the higher order sciences. So to begin there, the whole project New Reality, there I put in new 4D science releases and new 4D reality directives. And that is because, as you understood in the previous video, the reality field that we are part of, the old order program, is being cleared out. And there are different methods to exist within the new scope of reality. And that's why they are rearranging the fourth dimension now. And that's why I'm calling it the new 4D science releases and new 4D reality directives, or regulations. You decide yourself. But again, as you understood in the previous video, there is a difference there. The reason why that is because they are now effectively clearing out the artificial fourth dimension and are pushing us into a new version of the fourth dimension, probably under the parallel universal matrices. And I'm here putting it in plural because there are more than one, all depending on which faction that you are dealing with. And that is due to the laws of relative reality. We understand that it's not just one dimension, which is why it's inaccurate to call it a fourth dimension. But we're doing that for the ones that are getting ready to go into the higher order sciences, not until their neural networks are working in the correct manner. Are they truly capable of understanding why things are never singular as we have been accustomed to inside the base program? It's always multiple realities, and it's not the multiverse that goes with string theory. We need to be observant of the words that we are using because they are connected to thought forms or systems of thought, or when we go into the density energies, complex information systems. And each word is kind of a symbol that gives access to a specific point within the holographic network. And that is where I want to go with this video, is to work with how do we work with holographic information, and how do we change our neural network to be able to work with holographic information. And that is the point of the new science releases and your new reality directives, plus also cleaning up the old artificial fourth, which the last couple of days have been very intense in that one. They are really kicking hard on the insectoids. And we have been pushed back, all of us, into the artificial fourth, so that those of us who still have energy fields connected there, we have got reconnected and recalibrated. And I have just been doing some intense clearing work for the last 4 years, within 5 hours or so. It just like kind of, if you have, okay, sorry about, I'm just spinning off here, but let me explain this first. First and foremost, it's like having a near-death experience when you get looped correctly back into a timeline that's closing down. That means that you need to retrieve and retract and delete everything, or annihilate everything that's connected to it. Otherwise, it will ripple in to your energy system, and by that instigate what could be... Okay, how do I explain this? It's a kind of a feedback loop, as in if you're not clearing what's connected to that timeline, then it will be positioned into your energy field. And it will that to begin with as well. But you have the opportunity to really do what we call a full roundup clearing when they shut down timelines. And that's kind of what has happened yesterday. But it always comes with another feature that kind of indicates that once a timeline is being shut down like they're doing now, that is a kind of a death. For me, it always, I've seen that many times now, so I'm kind of getting used to it. And it's all holographic, but since most of these artificial timelines in the fourth dimension, or the old world order artificial fourth dimension, are linked up to technology and storyboards. It's just portions of our genetic material that are inserted into these little spheres, where each little unit, actually it's just one consciousness unit, is being put into a program that is run by disks, and then the storyboard runs that program so that they might have five or six consciousness units that they have harvested. That's one of the things they've got from the original vessel that I came in with, and they took, and the cows took it over and chopped it up. So they kind of got this replicated, not really functional, but it is still linked to a sort of a bioform, and therefore it's technically a life form, even though my templated energy system has been shifted out and divided onto other timelines. The body I came into when I got under the control in 1959 when I entered. Anyways, that's not where I want to go, but all of this is just so for me, it's completely logical because I've been working with it for so long, but you don't understand the subtext of what I'm saying here. So when I'm saying that I have this vision of a death, they showed me that I kind of fell down the stairs and broke my neck. That's the kick-off. So I know now a timeline is shutting down, and that means portions of my genetics will then be shut down, and there are still viability there. They're still linked up to certain portions, and that I will go through a process that's similar to when you die. That is, that you can clear up your entire connection points to the holographic network on these levels of your energy system. And that's a huge thing to be given, but at the same time also it runs so quickly. Similar when you die, you go through the tunnel of light, quote unquote. That is where you go through the timeline that is connected to your physical vessel. And things have been inside the base program, people are only connected to one timeline. But once you get into the fourth dimension, you begin to work with your energy system, you get connected to multiple timelines. So therefore, all of these ties into your heart. And if you don't disconnect to them and clear this out, then when they shut down one timeline that is connected to your heart, or is connected to the chiasm in the fourth dimension, you will lose potentiality. You will lose that part of your energy system. It will close down an entire field. And if that field is highly polluted, then the closing of it will follow the directives of the old world order program, which means that if it's highly contaminated, it will be drawn to the cycle of the past versions of Earth that it belongs to when the timeline shuts down. That is the root flushing out mechanism of the old world order program, so that when people have worn out their energy systems within the reincarnational cycles and they do the final death, that's where they die, the moth, as it's said in Hebrew, you will surely die. That's the death. Until then, you are not dead. And that's what the snake tells Eve or Chava in the Garden of Eden, that she says, well, if I do this, the Baal god, which is Yahweh, will slay me to death. And the snake says, no, you will not die. You will surely not die. And that is when you read the Hebrew text, you will see it's a double pronunciation of death, death. So that is the understanding of you will die both physically and energetically. So that's the complete death. So that's what happens when a timeline shuts down. Otherwise, we just recirculate it within the wheel of actually 12 houses, going with the 12 lineages, just continuously going around, which is symbolized in the astrological chart, which of course is the enslavement chart. It's nothing to do with, oh yeah, I want to work with this. Actually, you're supposed to work with this kind of, if I want to free myself on the path of liberation, where are my planets in the houses, and what do I need to clear out, and what are the planets representations of, which faction do they represent? And that's again goes with the original lineages and pillar projects, and which faction had access to different planetary systems, which schemes do they belong to. And it's a very complex thing. It has nothing to do with what most people understand as astrology. So at some point, if I were to, not that I am, because people can only get out of the enslavement programs by their own means, but if the full understanding, that's part of what some of what we call the keepers and some of the Celtic races, the original Celtics, not the migrants that came from Mesopotamia, that came up and became the English Celts. but the original Celtic races that actually came from Atlantis, and that's a whole other bunch with what called the older version of Syrian A genetics that were reseated in what we understand as Scotland and Wales. Anyways, so they had that understanding of the stellar charts and the complete overlook of how to work with what we could say the clearing of the timelines, or the chiasm, if you like, but they are connected not just on a personal level, but also into the constellations, which is the zodiac. But that's using the stargates and these kind of things. It's very complex. I'm not going to go there. You see, I mean, there's a lot of information going on right here, because as that timeline shut down, I got access to I'm getting pushed into the fifth dimension. So therefore, in a way, which you say, well, the 4D science releases are for now, because we're upgrading the artificial fourth into the, what we call the probably universal matrix version of the fourth. And then those of us who continue will be pushed into the fifth. So hence later on, it will be the new 5D science releases and new 5D reality directives. But since 5D is not really being implemented into the base program, so in the fourth dimension in the new version of it. And the goal is to get rid of all of the old world order colonizing races that are using the artificial fourth also inside our reality. There are these overlaps, which you will learn to understand once you get into the other dimensions that are connected to our reality field. Once you are now in so-called third dimension, where you're only seeing it within the spatial features. But as you go into the fourth dimension, you also connect holographic networks, and there you begin to work with holographic information systems. And they are very complex, and the reason why I'm saying complex is because they're kaleidoscopic. You kind of, if you twist a little bit on the energy or the frequency pattern, and here we are now talking oscillations and not frequency patterns, even though it means the same, but to make it, to kind of distinguish between frequencies as being part of the base program, electromagnetic energy, which have wave features. But oscillations are kind of what we call the vibrational state of energy in the holographic density realities of the true composition of our reality field. And that's the shift that is happening right now. So we move backwards to clean out those of us who kind of got the information, and it had to be done quickly. And that means being pushed back into what we could say the perception of the artificial fourth inside our reality. And the best way to see that is right now I'm seeing ants everywhere. Across the street person that lives there, he's out doing with his car, and I'm not seeing him. I'm only seeing an ant and a slug, and it's a little bit annoying. It's a human, but my brain interprets it like that, and there are chemtrailing on the sky. So I now know I am positioned in the relative reality version of the artificial fourth that is running parallel with the base program, because the fourth dimension always been connected to our base program reality setup, which I saw very clearly in Australia, where they constantly showed me how they had the fourth dimension behind our physical reality, and how humans were clones, connected the true version with the fourth. They had the clone inside of here. So I got a really good look in to the artificial fourth that is connected to the base program and are technically upholding it, hence the energetic parasites that are positioned in another artificial version of the fourth dimension. You have the areas where the colonizers are living connected to our reality field. I talk about that in a Changemaker material as well. And then you have the other realities that are, and when I say Changemaker material, I talk about course 1, 2, and 3. But then you have the other realities that are connected, or is it course 4? Sorry about that. Okay, back. Sorry. So I am a little bit off because of that energy that keeps coming in. But this is the time to make this material, because once I'm out of it, I will not remember what I need to say, so this is why I have to do it here. You will just bear with me being a little bit all over the place. But it's also a good place to show what happens when the insectoid genetics kick in the neural network. So this is also an opportunity to not only clear the fields, but also at the same time focus on the neural networks and say, okay, what do I need to do to alter that genetic composition that are clearly part of my neural network, linking me up to the artificial fourth, as you know from the book Torology, as well as the advanced clearing work course material of the alien inserted technology. It's all connected to insectoid genetics. So that's where we need to clear out now, so that we disconnect from the artificial fourth of the old world order composition and link up to the new reality directives and following the new 4D science releases of the new sciences that are coming in. And that's where I want to take this, because that's the preparation for those of us who are doing the transition. We need to get out of the old world order, artificial fourth, by clearing out the technologies that keeps us stuck there, clearing out the regress genetics that keeps us stuck there, clear out the fields that are inserted into our energy system and connected to the chiasm that keeps us stuck there, and all of these levels that are part of the progression work, especially in the advanced clearing work session or section. But these courses only make sense if you kind of have the understanding of how your energy system actually works. So that's again the transition science courses and the advanced clearing work courses that must be worked through to get the full understanding of this information. And I know it's tedious that you have to go through so many layers of information and so many courses. But remember, I am creating a new pattern of information, new frames of references. I'm literally taking everything that you know into a complex information system where many, many different layers are being built up. And the more layers that patterns of change has, the more effective it will be, the more it will push you there if you work with it diligently and do your clearing work and contemplate on the information. That's where I want to go here, because you already had the free material on the whole academy, how to contemplate, and you can do that one, which ties into what we call the Bailey material, because they talk about that as well. But the Buddhists talk about contemplation as well. And it's kind of always been connected to meditation, as in, yes, sit in meditation. But what does it really mean to contemplate? How do you work with contemplation? And there's a difference between contemplating on something you need to clean out and contemplating on something you need to create. So we need to know which direction we're going with our contemplation. And contemplation is not affirmation. It's not about sitting there visualizing that this is what you want to happen. There might come visions, but these visions are more just what you could say content of your own feels that shows you when you contemplate on a piece of information. That's the connection point or the information that's already stored in your field when you contemplate on a piece of information. So for instance, if we say on the whole project New Reality front page, again, Google site, and I say it's time to learn new ways of being human. And just that alone would be a sentence to contemplate on, because you see, when you contemplate on concepts. You contemplate on words, which means you're beginning to work with your left hemisphere to lift it up to a higher state of processing information, not just linearly, as you have learned in keeping the psychic energetic balance, or the psychic energy, the psychic processes, and keeping the psychic energetic balance. There you learn to create the 6 neural networks that are connected to 6 different ways of processing information. And I'm not going to go into detail with that here, because you get it in the transition science courses, where you build that context to be able to do the transformative ways that follows with the transformative energy system that leads to the activation of your true mind field. So this is not meditation. This is not about sitting there meditating upon, okay, how can I distinguish between meditation and contemplation? Meditation is a way of contemplating on things, but meditating in the Buddhist way and the Buddhist approach is technically a technique that goes with the white Syrian type of genetics in the neural network that were activated by the presence of the original Buddha. So once he was gone, that type of teaching system lost its validity. As long as the teacher's there will be a reciprocity and an amplification of the type of genetics that needs to be activated. Same as when I'm gone and dead and do not exist anymore in physical form, my teachings and everything I've done will become invalid. So that means that when I feel it's time for me to go, I will shut everything down. That's why I'm keeping so strict control of my information. So I'm able to take as much down as I can. Of course, I haven't got full access to every level on the internet, but everything I can will be taken down its physical form, including taking down what we could say the thought forms behind. And the Buddha did that as well. That's why it was never put into writing. There's a reason why it was never put into writing. So whoever reinvented it were not in any ways or forms in alignment with the original Buddhist teachings. And therefore people that are studying that are not studying the teachings of the Buddha. They're studying the teachings of Nagarjuna. That's a totally different guy. He's an old world order, Syrian A, insectoid, reptoid infused, Naga, under control of the Naga, underworld snakes thingy. So that's very important to understand that. So that when people are going into this whole Buddhist things and they're thinking they're actually working with the original teaching system and they are studying material of people that have interpreted it, they are only interpreting what's left in the collective consciousness field that people can tap into. And as more and more study the material over the course of time, it's 2,500 years old now, then it gets more and more contaminated and it gets more and more parasitic and it gets more and more distorted, which is why I've taken the time to both do my take on Buddhism, to put out there and say, now we shut the door to the old Buddhist teaching systems. That was the last piece of it. What was left, the white Syrian elders pulled out. We also know the last lineage that is inside our reality of the Dalai Lamas. When he dies, there will be no next Dalai Lama because the Chinese have taken that over. So everything on that level is shutting down. And those of you who are still linked up to that, when you do the old teaching systems, understand that that's complex information patterns that are now collapsing because they belong to the old world order. And if you continue to cling on to the old teaching systems, you will fall with the pole that you have tied yourself to. So that's also important to understand, that we can say, well, we would do, I have recommended, I'm working with the techniques of it, but mindfulness has been pulled out of the Buddhist teaching systems anyways. It just means to be observant of the now and understand yourself completely, scanning yourself, working with yourself, observing yourself. Take a stand back as a kind of a step back where you look at yourself, observe your behavior, which is a frontal lobe thing. Mindfulness is activating your frontal lobe and taking control of your limbic insectoid response mechanism. So you stop just doing what you feel there to do when you can't stop yourself. That's the frontal lobe that you develop in mindfulness, where you observe your actions, you observe how you do things, and you observe what this leads to. And that's important when we're talking holographic information. Because once you're led into the fourth dimension, if you do not have that mental control and emotional control, you will cause havoc in the new worlds that are coming. And that's why there is this huge selection going on. Can people control this, or can't they control this? And be mindful, to use that word, that in the old world order, there were punishment systems. So that meant that people had the chance of 3, as we talked about. But in that version was that if they breached 3 times, the first time they would be pushed back into what we could say kind of reschooling, connected to the artificial 4th, where they came under certain artificial programs, which is why many are connected to these rehabilitation programs, which of course over the course of time got more and more distorted due to the rebirth. But if they continuously transgress, then it moves out of there and goes into what we could say the connection point to the underworld forces. And if it continues to do that, then it's pushed into the abyss. So there is this part of the original reality program, as well as in the restoration program dynamics, as I talk about both in the perception logs as well as in the transition science course material. This reality is engineered to recalibrate and restore the genetics that got affected by the timeline event. And if people don't show signs of improvement, meaning learning to control their infected insectoid level of their brain capacity, that's the instinctual level. They connect by that to the insectoid level, and eventually they will become an insect inside this reality. And then someone will step on them. That's it. So tough life, right? But you are what you become. Similar people that were very snake-like eventually did become artificial snakes in the 4th or inside this reality, etc. Everybody is what they have made themselves to be. That's part of the regression dynamics. And we know that from the Hindu teaching systems of karma or the regression spiral. Okay. So that's how it works. You become what you are effectively in the 4th dimension, as well as later on inside this reality program. As your energy system gets more and more depleted and more contaminated, it loses first the mind field. Then it just becomes what we call a functional brain to operate inside the reality field, but there's no higher order cognitive processes. Then it becomes purely emotional. And then once that has regressed, because then it becomes more and more instinctual and more primitive, then it reverts into that type of organic form that is equivalent to the type of energy system we are dealing with. That these dynamics in the 4th dimension becomes more and more observant, so that you actually in the 4th dimension are shown as an imprint what you actually are. And that's why when I look at my neighbor over there, he's in human form, but his energy system is insectoid. That's why I'm seeing the ant, because his energy system is insectoid. So next life, he will become the bug I'm already seeing, or a slug, either way. So that's what I'm seeing. He has reverted to such a degree there are no frontal lobe processes going on. And that's why the Buddhist teachings teaches us to go in and learn that frontal lobe control in meditation and mindfulness. So meditation is looking at who and what you are. For instance, let me give an example. I'm using that as well in some of the energy work. You are technically using meditation when you're doing clearing work. But you go into a deep state. You go from alpha into beta, into delta, or to theta if you really get deep. That's meditation, where you learn to shift between the frequency neural network capacities that your brain is working on. In meditation, you learn to shift between the different neural networks of your brain. You learn to work with the different frequencies. And I've told you that you can activate the higher order energies of that doing the double hand position. So when I teach you to contemplate, you can put your double hand position on your heart field and amplify your vibrational state to spark to life what we could say some of the higher order levels of your neural networks. But you can't do that if you have not cleared your heart field. So that's the problem. And that's why, again, the basic energy work, which is so important in this work, because that's where you begin to learn to clear the emotional patterns that clogs your heart field with fear, fear, with old belief systems, with your comfort zone, with all sorts of defense mechanisms that keeps you safe, all depending on what you have experienced in this life and previous lifetimes. So there is also the psychology about the advanced work with the emotional field and the many layers of your emotional field that are connected to past lives. All of that must be cleared. All of that ties you to timelines, and it ties you to punishment programs. It ties you into, as we could say, when you are in the old world order program, you were first under the enslavement programs, under the Dracos. If you fucked that up too many times, you got pushed, due to the transgression rate, you got pushed into the underworld. There you came under the control of the imprisonment templates. So, and if you fucked it up there, you would be pushed into the abyss, and that's the way out. That's where the snake will chew up that field of you and take away what is left of the infected genetics of the timeline event, because that's what the snake is. It's a very, very large conglomerate of failed races, failed lineages, failed template structures, infected into oblivion of not really being anything else than just some huge thing that moves around but can shapeshift into becoming visible, all depending on what type of genetics that it's utilizing. And it is, as I said, connected to the Y chromosome. But females have it as well, because we have a father, and our father is part of our female pattern, fetal pattern, the parental fetal pattern. That is, when mom and dad decided that they were going to create you, then they merged their fields in the sexual activity, and by that field merging and the artificial fourth dimensional technology and the activation and opening of the gates into who was to be pushed into that field, what was the composition, who matched that field, would be pulled in, and from that added in the third component, which is what you kind of say is the foundation of your personality matrix, the foundation of your emotional field and mental field and biofield. That's the fetal pattern. I explained that in the advanced work with the emotional field as well. And there's 10 times more to go with that. But the fetal pattern cannot be really adapted and changed until you have cleared your emotional field and got rid of your connection points to mom and dad, and then cleared out their fields within your emotional field. And then you begin to work with the axis of your personality matrix that are connected to your mind field and your code sequences of your biofield. So that's where we really nail the fetal pattern. And the only way we can recalibrate that is to learn to work with complex information systems, holographic information, and complex code systems. These can recreate our biofield code patterns and shift us out of the different programs that we have been put under, because it's all programs. It's like, think software on a computer. What you have programs for will be the quote unquote reality you're part of, relative reality. Or you could say, if you have an algorithm, you're pulled into a specific section of the virtual reality. But we don't do binary code virtual reality, which are a computer transhuman feature. We are here doing complex holographic realities based upon interactive code systems that aligns itself with the type of consciousness potentials as well as the viability rate of the energy system, and by that places the energy system and the consciousness potentials or units within a specific sector that aligns via a nodal point into the reality field network. And not until it has connected to the reality field network do we become part of that reality field. And then we connect to the racial grids via our consciousness units. Once that happens, we are seeded in to that part or portion of reality. So the symbol connects us to the reality network, holographically speaking. The consciousness units are connected via the book of life in the library to the root races or the lineages. And that portion of a reality has been removed in 2020 and has been shut down ever since to disconnect all of the original consciousness units and template structures from the progressive world. What we have got left now is what is in our local field, what we have taken control over and of by our work on the timelines via our chiasm or chiasm, if you like. It's a Greek word. It literally just means a cross. So in that you are the cross we are crucified upon, right? So what you understand is here that to stand sovereign in your own sphere of energy, you're literally having these two different code sequences of your consciousness units and your energy system. The energy system is connected to the heart, and the consciousness unit should be connected to your mind. So when a timeline shuts down, the process of this reviving or re-seeing everything is because then the mind field shuts down, then the heart field shuts down, and then what's left of consciousness unit will be pulled out and transferred back to, or via the gate systems, to the, often as in reincarnational cycles, to the huge machinery, because it is a machinery, it is alien technology, that will then store all of these consciousness units in little orbs, which will then later on be spawned out once the physical form creates an energy system that is in alignment with that type of consciousness units. Then the template will be put out of storage, pulled out of storage, and put into insertion, but only a portion of it, because there are no full templates in functionality inside the base program. It's stored in the hijacking storage units, and I'm not calling them libraries, but storage units, but they are similar to the library, but in what we call a regressed version. So this is just kind of going in when we understand when we work with information, there are goals to work with this information, not just linearly, oh, I need to learn this and study this, because most of you experience that once you have listened to my podcasts or you have read my material, you forget it as quickly as you have listened to it or studied it, and then you just go on with your everyday life. So we need to change that. We need to teach you, I need to teach you, you need to teach yourself how to correctly work with the information I am giving you. And it's time to get there now, because we are getting the fourth dimensional energies very, very close to our reality. And that's the first place we begin to build the complex information system, by working with the information that's been given. And after this little, probably be more than just one podcast on how to understand the holographic energies and how to work with the holographic complex information systems, because I need to take you through all of the steps of it. The new reality directives will then be very understandable. I already gave you a little bit of a teaser in the previous video that we need to change our ways, and why? Because you understand it goes with penalty. So if you do not learn to build your complex energy patterns into your energy system via the information that you are using, and that's why in the Future Human Project Course 1, I talk about the importance of dealing, or is it course? No, it's course 1, dealing with information and how you deal with information, because whatever you study, you will link up to, you will participate in it. You're not just looking at things anymore. You are participating via your eyesight. When you look at something, eyes are connected to the mind field. It's connected to the brain. So when you look at something, it affects your neural network. Hence, or that's why the retinal induction technologies have been implemented into the virtual reality of the internet. What you look at will connect you to the different factions. So the goal for us when we are on the internet is to understand which faction is behind which platform that we are interacting with. Because if you interact with a platform such as Facebook, which is why I'm phasing out on that one. I'm just completing so people kind of have access from there. But I have done it on what we said, an older version of Facebook before it came the metaverse, right? The moment they shifted there with the name, they told us that this is transhuman agenda. I already got the warnings prior to that one. And we have got it in public as well, how they have wrongfully utilized our information. They have been upfront with the social network TV show or movie or whatever you want to call it. They have been upfront with the trials. They have been upfront with the algorithms, how it ties in, and all of these kind of things. And we can see all the way through and through. And that's why fewer and fewer are actually using Facebook. But there's still this little business kind of unwritten code that if you really want to be a business that's taken seriously, you have to also have a Facebook page, right? It's just still there. So, but I'm not doing Instagram, of course, because that's insectoid influencers they are all insectoids with their little nice bodies and everything they are showing off materialism to the highest degree. That's what Instagram technically is to a large degree. I know there are other things going on there, but it's self-promotion, platform that all goes with see how beautiful I am, photoshopping and tampering with reality and creating a false self-perception, false self-image, and a false other connection by creating an inflated artificial version of who and what we are. I know there are other people on Instagram talking about other stuff, but it's all self-promotion, right? We create an artificial reality of who and what we are, and we use the social platforms, the social media to enforce that by other people looking at us and giving us energy for what we want to promote. So this is one of the reasons why I began the YouTube channel, but eventually removed my face from it to avoid the projection mechanisms of the eyes of others. And this is kind of where people say, that sounds very paranoid, right? Don't look at me, right? But that's not what it is. It is a matter of fact that as we activate our original genetics, or people activate their regress genetics, what they look at, they will also look at energetically, and by that become a bridge of energies that can be transferred to what they look at. Also part of the news and whatever's been brought there and whatever's been brought to our attention, it's all to get us to look at it so we can amplify it. And that's one of the reasons why we got the saying, turn the other cheek. So what you don't look at, you don't give energy. What you look at, you do give energy. What you link up to, you do give energy due to the law of participation, as well as the way that they have built up the internet. The internet is built up by that idea that this is the closest we get to the fourth dimension inside the base program. And that's where we have begun creating the algorithms that are now linking all technology, computer, phones, whatever, surveillance, Facebook, doesn't matter what it is. It links up to alien technology, all of it. And I know some of you are thinking that, oh, if I just shift to that platform, then there will be these encryptions and then it won't be accessed and whatever. And perhaps that's correct. But from me, I'm just using normal logical sense. If we do have a cover up and we do have a very, what we call negatively influenced secret government going on in America, just to use that as an example, and there are the restrictions and people are making platforms where where these restrictions are not there, wouldn't that be one of the platforms that the cybersecurity, cyber police would look at and create algorithms or worms to get access to, or false accounts, what have you, to monitor it? Just common sense. So people think that, oh yeah, I'm safe on the internet if I go there or whatever other people are creating. And they are not thinking that perhaps the transhuman agenda are using these platforms. They're using fear of other people to get them to sign up for these platforms and then come under some really severe harvesting programs instead. So this is the game that you're in, and that's some of the game that people need to understand when we're working with holographic information systems and complex information systems that holographically are connected to our reality. It all ties into some portion of the neural network where your energy will become part if you give consent to it. There's a reason why we have this giving consent. Oh yeah, I agree. Oh yeah, I consent. Now at least they kind of have reject all, even though we know they don't reject all, but at least we can say, no, I'm not giving consent. So it's also about finding the platforms that you can decline everything. You can reject everything if you like. So, but if there is still this, you can do that. So you're not giving consent or you do not agree. That's an emotional thing. But if you still look at it, you're still mentally part of it. So there are these different levels of working with the holographic information system. So this is kind of where I want to go with this little series of podcasts here when we're talking about understanding the holographic information systems. And we will continue in the next video. Thank you.